When I bought my house, I thought I was finally escaping the endless cycle of apartment living. The paper-thin walls, the leaky ceilings, and the landlords who never fixed anything. And I imagined quiet evenings on my porch, a neatly cut lawn, and the satisfaction of knowing that at least here, in this little patch of suburbia, I would have peace. But peace was the one thing I didn't get, because living in this neighborhood meant living under the reign of the infamous HOA president that everyone referred to simply as Karen. A woman who believed she was the ultimate ruler of the block. Her clipboard clutched like a sword, her phone camera at the ready to capture every supposed violation, and her scowl permanently carved into her face. And at first I thought if I kept my head down, obeyed the rules, and made no waves, maybe I could avoid her wrath. But fate had other plans, because one morning I stepped outside to get my newspaper and noticed something strange. An orange extension cord stretched across my lawn, plugged into the outdoor socket on the side of my garage, snaking all the way across to Karen's driveway, where her gleaming white Tesla sat humming quietly, drinking from my electricity like a parasite. And I stood there for a good minute trying to process what I was looking at, because it seemed so ridiculous, so brazen, that at first I thought it had to be some sort of mistake. But when I unplugged the cord and left it coiled neatly on her driveway, only to check my security camera footage later that day and see her march right back over while I was at work, plug it back in without hesitation, and drive off like she owned the place, I realized this wasn't a mistake at all. This was theft, blatant and deliberate, and the audacity of it boiled my blood. So that evening, I walked over to her porch to confront her. But instead of being apologetic or even embarrassed, she folded her arms and told me in the most condescending tone that the HOA had a community sustainability initiative and that my outlet was considered a shared resource, which was utter nonsense because I had read the bylaws before moving in and nothing of the sort existed. And when I pointed this out, she smirked and told me I was being unneighborly, that if I didn't like it, I could take it up with the board, but that I'd regret trying to make waves. And sure enough, within the week, I found 3 violation notices taped to my door. One claiming my lawn was uneven, it wasn't. Another accusing me of leaving my trash cans out too long, I hadn't. And the third saying my mailbox paint was chipped, freshly painted just 2 months earlier. And I realized that she was retaliating, using her position of power to harass me, all while her Tesla sucked down my electricity every single day. My bill climbing higher and higher as I watched footage of her smug face casually plugging in as if it were her birthright. And my patience began to erode, until one night over beers, I vented to a friend of mine who happened to be an electrician. And after laughing at the sheer audacity of this woman, he gave me an idea. Something I never would have considered on my own, but that suddenly seemed like the perfect form of poetic justice. Because he explained that with a few modifications, I could install a device on that particular outdoor outlet, a hidden switch that, when flipped, would send a carefully controlled surge of power strong enough to fry anything plugged into it without damaging my own circuits. And though I hesitated at first, because who really thinks about sabotaging a car battery, my frustration finally outweighed my caution. So one weekend we got to work, wiring the system in such a way that it looked completely normal from the outside. But the moment I decided I'd had enough, one flick would send her Tesla into electronic shock. And for days afterward, I waited, biding my time as she continued her theft, smirking at me across the street, parading her clipboard around like she was the queen of the neighborhood. And I endured, paying the higher bills, knowing that patience would make the payback all the sweeter. Until finally, the perfect opportunity arrived, a sunny Saturday afternoon when Karen was hosting one of her absurd HOA community events in her front yard, complete with folding chairs, lemonade stands, and her endless bragging about how eco-friendly she was for owning a Tesla, lecturing the neighbors about their gas-powered cars and carbon footprints, while, unbeknownst to most, she was leeching her so-called eco-power straight out of my wall socket. And as I looked out my window and saw the familiar orange cord running across my lawn, plugged snugly into her car while she boasted about her virtue, I decided the time had come, so I slipped inside, opened the panel, and flipped the hidden switch. And the effect was immediate. Her Tesla flickered like a dying light bulb, headlights flashing wildly, dashboard going dark, a faint pop echoing as smoke curled faintly from the cable. And within seconds, the proud humming machine was nothing more than a lifeless hunk of metal, its massive battery pack fried beyond revival. And the best part was the look on her face as her little audience gasped, pointing at the smoking cord while she scrambled toward the car, yanking the plug, mashing buttons, muttering frantically that it must be a malfunction. But there was no saving it. The damage was done. And as the crowd began to whisper, some even chuckling because they too had suffered under her petty tyranny, Karen's head snapped up and her eyes locked onto mine across the street. Her voice shrill as she screamed that I had sabotaged her car, that I had committed a crime. But instead of panicking, I stepped calmly onto my porch and pointed to the security cameras mounted on my house, explaining in a loud, clear voice that I had weeks of footage showing her trespassing on my property, stealing my electricity without permission, and that I was fully prepared to hand it all over to the police along with a utility theft report. And the shift in the crowd was immediate. Neighbors who had once feared her now looked at her with disgust, shaking their heads, whispering to one another. And she went from screaming to stammering, her face pale, her hands trembling. And though she tried to bluster, claiming it was all part of HOA rules, nobody bought it anymore. Not after seeing her exposed so publicly, and the fallout was swift. Because in the days that followed, the HOA board, long tired of her overreach but previously too intimidated to act, finally held a vote and stripped her of her position, citing her abuse of power. While her Tesla sat in the shop with a dead battery that would cost her nearly $20,000 to replace out of pocket because the warranty didn't cover external electrical surges. And she had no one to blame but herself. And as for me, my power bills returned to normal. My mailbox remained violation-free. And for the first time since moving in, I could sit on my porch with a cup of coffee, watching the world go by, knowing that the self-appointed queen of the neighborhood had been dethroned by her own arrogance. Her clipboard reduced to nothing more than a piece of plastic. Her Tesla, a very expensive paperweight. And all it took was a little patience, a little planning, and one perfectly timed surge of justice that proved bullies can only take what isn't theirs for so long before the universe, or in this case, a hidden switch, finally fries their illusions of power once and for all.